Growing up as the second child in my family was like living in a shadow that grew darker with each passing year. My sister Chloe was always the star, the golden child who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Every accomplishment of hers was celebrated like a national holiday, while mine barely registered as footnotes. I spent years trying to measure up, only to realize the measuring stick was rigged from the start. Little did they know that years of inequality would culminate in one perfect day, my wedding day, when everything would finally change. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. Before I begin, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and if you have ever felt overshadowed by a sibling, hit that subscribe button as we dive into my journey. The inequality in our household began so gradually that I barely noticed it at first. I was born 3 years after Chloe, and from what I can gather from old photo albums, our parents initially treated us equally. There are pictures of my first birthday with as much decoration and fanfare as Chloe had for hers. But somewhere around the time I turned 5, things began to shift. Chloe was excelling in kindergarten. Her teacher called her a natural leader and academically gifted. My parents beamed with pride at every parent-teacher conference. When I entered kindergarten 2 years later, I was a different kind of child. Quieter, more observant, less inclined to raise my hand first for every question. My teacher called me thoughtful and creative, but somehow these qualities never elicited the same pride from my parents. By elementary school, the pattern was firmly established. Chloe brought home straight A's and participated in every extracurricular activity possible. She won the spelling bee in 3rd grade, and our living room wall became a shrine to her certificate and newspaper clipping. When I won the art contest that same year, my drawing was taped to the refrigerator for a week, then disappeared. "Your sister is exceptional," my father would say, not realizing how those words cut me. Some people are just born with that spark. The implication, of course, was that I lacked that spark. My mother was more subtle, but equally damaging. "Try to be more like your sister," she would suggest, when I brought home a B+ instead of an A. Chloe always checks her work twice. The distinctions grew more pronounced each year. When Chloe performed in the 5th grade talent show, singing a solo that brought the audience to their feet, my parents bought her roses and took the entire family out for a celebration dinner. When I placed 2nd in the science fair, 3 months later, my mother simply said, "That is nice, honey," before asking Chloe about her upcoming piano recital. The message was clear. In our family, there was a hierarchy of worth, and I was firmly at the bottom. Middle school only deepened the divide between us. Chloe transitioned from elementary school darling to middle school queen without missing a beat. She was immediately popular, invited to every party, and selected for every leadership position. Her academic excellence continued, with teachers using her papers as examples for other students. I found my own niche in middle school, joining the robotics club and discovering I had a knack for computer programming. But my achievements in this arena were foreign to my parents, who could not brag about them as easily as they could about Chloe's more traditional successes. One incident stands out painfully from 7th grade. I had worked for months on my science fair project, a computer program that could predict weather patterns based on historical data. It won 1st place in the regional competition, qualifying me for the state level. The state competition fell on the same day as Chloe's dance recital. There was never any question about which event my parents would attend. "We will see your project another time," my mother said, patting my shoulder. "This recital is very important for your sister's dance scholarship application." I went to the state competition alone, except for my science teacher, who graciously offered to drive me. I won 2nd place, and when I called my parents to tell them, they were still at the post-recital dinner with Chloe and could not talk long. When I arrived home with my trophy, it was placed on a shelf in my bedroom, while Chloe's dance photos were framed and displayed in the hallway. During those middle school years, I found validation from teachers who recognized my talents and friends who appreciated me for who I was. But most importantly, I found an ally in my Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, who seemed to be the only family member who saw the inequality. "You have gifts they do not see yet," she told me once when she visited. Sometimes parents have blind spots. It does not mean they love you less. I tried to believe her, but the evidence suggested otherwise. High school should have been a fresh start, but instead it only crystallized the golden child dynamic in our family. Chloe became everything a parent could brag about: homecoming queen, valedictorian, president of 3 clubs, and volunteer at the local hospital. She was accepted early decision to Princeton, my father's alma mater, fulfilling a dream he had apparently been nurturing since her birth. I did well enough in high school, B+ average, captain of the robotics team, a solid SAT score, but none of it compared to Chloe's accomplishments in my parents' eyes. When my acceptance letter from Georgia Tech arrived, my father's response was, "Well, that is a decent engineering school. Not Ivy League, but decent." The financial disparity was what truly revealed their priorities. For Chloe, they had saved a college fund that covered her full tuition at Princeton, plus living expenses. For me, they offered to pay half of my in-state tuition and suggested I take out loans for the rest. "We spent more than we planned on Chloe's education," my mother explained. "Princeton is expensive, and we want to give her every advantage. Every advantage." The words echoed in my head for days afterward. That night, lying in bed, I made a private promise to myself. One day I would prove my worth, not to them, but to myself. I would build a life so full of meaning and success that their approval would become irrelevant. It was the first night I slept peacefully in years, free from the constant need to measure up to impossible standards. College became my escape from the shadow of Chloe's perfection. At Georgia Tech, nobody knew I was the lesser sibling, the afterthought. There I was, just James, the guy with a knack for coding and a dry sense of humor that actually made people laugh. For the first time, I could define myself on my own terms. I worked part-time at the campus IT department to supplement my finances, since my parents' contribution barely covered tuition. The job was a blessing in disguise. It gave me practical experience that would later set me apart from my peers who only had classroom knowledge. During those years, I limited contact with my family to holiday visits and occasional phone calls. Every conversation inevitably turned to Chloe's latest achievements at Princeton, her prestigious internships, and the important connections she was making. I learned to end these calls, quickly protecting my growing sense of self-worth from their unintentional erosion. Instead, I invested in friendships that became my chosen family. Terry, my roommate, who shared my passion for technology. Daria, the brutally honest computer science major who pushed me to excel. And Marcus, whose entrepreneurial spirit would later inspire my career path. They saw me, really saw me, and their validation was based on who I actually was, not who I failed to be in comparison to someone else. It was during junior year that I met Emily in a database architecture class. She was brilliant, challenging, and completely unimpressed by academic pedigrees or family connections. When I eventually told her about growing up in Chloe's shadow, her response changed something in me. "Their failure to see your value reflects their limitations, not yours," she said simply, as if stating an obvious fact. Meanwhile, Chloe continued her perfect trajectory through Princeton, collecting accolades and recommendations that my parents shared proudly with their friends. I stopped asking about her, and they rarely asked about my life in return. After graduation, I joined a small tech startup in Atlanta focused on cybersecurity solutions. The salary was modest, but the equity package was promising, and I believed in the company's vision. My parents were predictably underwhelmed when I told them, especially since Chloe had accepted a position at a prestigious consulting firm in New York with a starting salary that made mine look like pocket change. "Is this just temporary until you find something more established?" my father asked, concern, barely masking his disappointment. "No," I replied firmly. "This is exactly where I want to be." The startup flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Within 3 years, we were acquired by a major tech corporation, and my equity became actual wealth. I bought a comfortable condo in Atlanta, invested wisely, and found myself financially independent at 25, something neither of my parents had achieved at that age. During those early career years, I also began therapy, finally addressing the childhood emotional neglect that had shaped so much of my self-perception. My therapist helped me recognize patterns of seeking validation and taught me to become my own source of approval. It was painstaking work undoing decades of internalized messages about my worth being tied to achievement and comparison. You do not need to outshine Chloe to matter, my therapist reminded me. You just need to live authentically as yourself. As I built my career and worked on my emotional health, Emily and I grew closer. Her software development career took off at a major tech company, and we supported each other's ambitions without competition. What struck me most about our relationship was how naturally she celebrated my successes. Not with the surprise my parents always showed when I achieved something noteworthy, but with an expectation that, of course, I would succeed, because she saw my capabilities clearly. Meeting Emily's family was another revelation. Her parents asked me questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. They remembered details about my projects and followed up months later. Her father, a high school math teacher, was genuinely impressed by my work in cybersecurity and never once compared me to anyone else. It was a glimpse of what family support should feel like, unconditional and personal. After 3 years together, I proposed to Emily during a hiking trip to the North Georgia mountains. At sunset, overlooking a valley ablaze with autumn colors, I asked her to marry me. Her yes felt like the beginning of a new family, one built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. That night, as we celebrated over champagne in a mountain cabin, Emily brought up the inevitable question of how to involve our families in the wedding. I admitted my hesitation about including my parents and Chloe in any significant way. They will find a way to make it about her even on our day, I said. Emily squeezed my hand. This is our wedding, and we set the boundaries. You have done so much healing. Maybe this is a chance for them to see you as you truly are now, successful, confident, and loved for exactly who you are. Her optimism gave me courage, but I still insisted on maintaining control over our wedding plans. We would pay for everything ourselves, removing the power that financial contribution might give my parents over our decisions. While my relationship with Emily flourished, my family dynamics remained strained, but evolved in subtle ways. Chloe's perfect life narrative was showing cracks that my parents tried desperately to plaster over. Her prestigious consulting job demanded 80-hour work weeks that left her exhausted and unfulfilled. Her relationships never seemed to last more than a few months, though my parents spoke about each new boyfriend as a potential son-in-law. During a rare family dinner when both Chloe and I were in town, I noticed how my mother quickly changed the subject when Chloe mentioned considering therapy for anxiety. Yet when I mentioned my own positive therapy experience, my mother looked concerned and asked if I was still having problems. The double standard remained firmly in place. That same night, Chloe asked pointed questions about my career success, something she had never done before. There was an edge to her curiosity that suggested she might be questioning her own choices for the first time. I answered honestly, but without the detailed financial specifics that might have made her uncomfortable. As Emily and I left that dinner, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "They still do not see you clearly, but I think your sister is beginning to." It was a small victory, but I would take it. Our wedding planning began with excitement and a clear vision. Emily and I wanted a celebration that reflected our values, meaningful rather than showy, intimate rather than extravagant, with every element intentionally chosen. We found a beautiful outdoor venue with a reception hall, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a lake. We selected a menu from our favorite local restaurant rather than a typical wedding caterer. Everything felt perfectly us. Then we told our families. My parents' first question was whether Chloe would have a special role in the ceremony. "We have not decided on the wedding party yet," I said carefully. "Well, of course your sister should be included prominently," my mother replied, as if it were already decided. "She has such a good eye for these things. She could help Emily with planning. Emily, always diplomatic but firm, smiled and said, "We have actually already done most of the planning ourselves. We have a very specific vision." My father nodded absently, then launched into a story about how Chloe had recently given a toast at her friend's wedding that brought the house down. The implication was clear. Chloe should give a speech at our wedding too. When we finally sent out invitations with our finalized wedding details, my mother called immediately. "You have only included 4 people in your wedding party, and none of them is Chloe." Her voice held that familiar note of disapproval. "She is your only sister." "We chose the people closest to us, Mom. Terry is my best man, and Emily's sister is her maid of honor. The other 2 are our closest friends. But family should come first," she insisted. "This is our wedding," I replied, my voice steady. "We are making choices that feel right to us." The tensions escalated during a family dinner 2 months before the wedding. My father, after his 3rd glass of wine, suggested that Chloe should make a major speech at the reception. "She is such a natural public speaker," he said proudly. "She could welcome everyone and introduce you 2 as a couple." I exchanged glances with Emily, whose patience was visibly wearing thin. "Dad, the best man and maid of honor, will give speeches as is traditional. We are not adding extra speeches. But Chloe has that special touch," he continued, oblivious to the growing discomfort around the table. "Remember how she emceed her college roommate's wedding? Everyone said she made the night special." It was Emily who finally spoke up. "With all due respect, we want our wedding to be special because it celebrates our relationship, not because of who gives speeches or has prominent roles." The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe looked down at her plate. My mother pursed her lips, and my father blinked in confusion, as if he could not comprehend why anyone would decline Chloe's involvement. In that moment, I saw our family dynamic through Emily's eyes. The constant elevation of Chloe above all else. The assumption that her participation would enhance any event. The complete disregard for my preferences, even at my own wedding. It was simultaneously infuriating and oddly liberating to have it displayed so blatantly. We left dinner early, and in the car Emily took my hand. "I am sorry, but I could not sit there and watch them try to make our wedding about her." "Do not apologize," I said, feeling strangely at peace. "You just confirmed what I have known my entire life." A week later, my Aunt Margaret called with news that would change everything. Her cancer, in remission for years, had returned aggressively. The doctors gave her months, possibly weeks. I drove to see her immediately. In her hospital room, frailer than I had ever seen her, but with the same sharp eyes, Aunt Margaret held my hand and said she needed to tell me something before she died. "I have kept silent too long," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you deserve to know the truth before you start your married life." The truth, as it turned out, was more validating and heartbreaking than I could have imagined. My parents had not only emotionally favored Chloe all these years, they had been financially supporting her adulthood in ways I never knew. They had paid the down payment on her New York apartment, which she claimed to have saved for herself. They supplemented her already substantial income with monthly transfers to maintain her lifestyle. They had even paid off her student loans in full, while I was still making payments on mine. "Your sister's perfect life is largely funded by your parents," Aunt Margaret said gently. "I found out last year when your father asked my financial advice about their retirement. They have been depleting their savings to maintain Chloe's image of success." I sat in stunned silence as pieces fell into place. Chloe's luxury apartment in one of New York's most expensive neighborhoods, her designer wardrobe, her frequent international vacations, all on a salary that, while good, could not possibly cover such extravagance. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally asked. "Because you are starting your own family, and you deserve to begin with truth," she replied. "And because I have enabled their behavior by staying silent, watching them drain their retirement to keep up Chloe's facade while you worked your way through college and built your success alone." I leaned over and kissed my aunt's forehead. "Thank you for telling me. On the drive home, I called Emily and shared everything. Her response was measured and wise as always. "This is not about revenge," she said. "This is about setting boundaries based on truth." Over the next several days, Emily and I discussed how to proceed. Direct confrontation would only create more drama and potentially ruin what should be one of the happiest days of our lives. Instead, we decided our wedding would be an opportunity to quietly but firmly establish the reality of our family dynamics and set the tone for our future interactions. We revised our seating chart, placing my parents and Chloe at a standard guest table rather than at the family table nearest to ours. We decided Emily's parents would walk her down the aisle, and my best friend Terry's father, who had been more of a mentor to me than my own dad, would stand in that role for me. We carefully planned every aspect of the ceremony and reception to honor the people who had genuinely supported us both. No dramatic confrontations, no public revelations, just a quiet restructuring of roles that reflected the emotional reality of our lives. It felt like finally telling the truth without having to say a word. Our wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with early summer sunshine glinting off the lake beside our venue. The ceremony would be held outdoors, with the reception following in the glass-walled hall overlooking the water. As I stood in the groom's suite, Terry adjusting my tie and offering humorous last-minute advice, I felt a profound sense of peace. "Your aunt would have loved to see this day," Terry said, knowing how much her recent passing had affected me. "She is here in all the ways that matter," I replied, touching the vintage cufflinks she had left me, her final gift. Through the window I could see guests arriving. Emily's large, boisterous family came in groups, laughing and hugging one another. My parents arrived precisely on time, my mother, in an expensive outfit that I knew had been chosen to photograph well, my father, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. Chloe arrived separately, turning heads in a dress that pushed the boundaries of appropriate wedding guest attire, without quite crossing the line. When they entered the venue, I could see their confusion as an usher directed them to their seats, regular guest seats, not the special family section they had clearly expected. My mother looked around, perhaps thinking there had been a mistake, but the usher was polite and firm, and they eventually took their assigned places, discomfort evident in their posture. The ceremony was everything Emily and I had dreamed of: intimate, meaningful, and authentic. Emily walked down the aisle with her parents on either side, their faces shining with genuine joy. When asked who supported this marriage, Emily's parents stood and said, "We do," with heartfelt enthusiasm. From my side, Terry's parents stood and said the same words with equal conviction, a choice that I saw register on my parents' faces with shock and hurt. As we exchanged vows, I caught a glimpse of Chloe in the audience. For once all eyes were not on her, and she seemed unsure how to respond to her supporting role in someone else's story. My parents sat stiffly, smiles fixed on their faces but confusion in their eyes. The reception continued the pattern we had established. The seats of honor around our table were filled with people who had truly been there for us. Emily's family, our closest friends, mentors, who had shaped our lives. My parents and Chloe were seated at a table with distant cousins, and my work colleagues, not insulting, but certainly not the position of prominence they had expected. When the time for speeches came, Terry rose first, telling heartfelt stories of our friendship and his admiration for the relationship Emily and I had built. Emily's sister spoke of her joy at gaining a brother who clearly treasured her sister. Neither mentioned my family of origin, except in passing, another subtle reinforcement of the reality of our relationships. I saw my father whisper something to my mother, gesturing toward the microphone. She shook her head slightly, finally sensing that their expected roles in this day had been politely but firmly revised. After dinner, as dancing began, my mother approached me, her smile tight. "We seem to have been seated rather far from you," she said, her tone conveying her real message. "Why have we been relegated to ordinary guest status? We seated everyone where it made most sense," I replied calmly. "I hope you are enjoying yourselves. Your father and I expected to be seated with the family," she pressed, "and Chloe is quite hurt that she was not included in the wedding party. I took a deep breath, feeling Emily's hand slip into mine as she joined us, sensing the tension. Mom, today is about celebrating with the people who have supported us consistently and seen us clearly. I said, my voice gentle but firm. We made our choices accordingly. We have always supported you, my mother protested. Have you? I asked, not unkindly. Aunt Margaret told me everything before she died. About the financial support you have given Chloe all these years while telling me I needed to make it on my own. About the apartment, the loans, the monthly supplements. My mother's face paled. That was different. Chloe needed to be your star. I finished for her. I understand. But today is not about that dynamic. Today is about Emily and me and the future we are building with people who value us both equally. My father joined us, then followed by Chloe, who had clearly sensed the important conversation happening. What is going on? My father asked, looking between us. Just establishing some truths, I said, and some boundaries for our relationship going forward. I love you all, but I will not continue the patterns that have defined our family until now. Chloe, to my surprise, was the first to really hear me. She looked at me with new eyes, seeing perhaps for the first time the impact of years of preferential treatment. I never asked to be the favorite, she said quietly, but I never refused it either. I am sorry, James. I should have said something years ago. It was the first genuine moment between us in memory, and it caught me off guard. I nodded, accepting her apology without needing to articulate all that it encompassed. My parents were less receptive, making awkward excuses about family dynamics and different children having different needs. But I could see the first cracks in their perception, the beginning of recognition that their behavior had consequences they had never intended. We should rejoin the party, Emily suggested gently. Perhaps we can all talk more another time when it is not your wedding day. As they walked away, I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure, just relief. The truth had finally been spoken, not in anger, but in calm assertion of reality. It was not revenge I had sought, just recognition and boundaries. The rest of the reception was a blur of joy. Dancing with Emily, cake, cutting laughter with friends, the warmth of genuine celebration surrounding us. My parents and Chloe left early, citing the long drive home, but not before my father awkwardly shook my hand and said, "You have done well for yourself, better than I gave you credit for." It was not an apology, but it was a beginning. 1 year later, Emily and I hosted a dinner party in our new home. Among the guests were my parents, and Chloe seated among our other friends without special status or treatment. Over the year, our relationship had evolved, not dramatically transformed, but slowly shifting toward something more honest. Chloe had started therapy herself, working through her own issues with our parents' expectations and the pressure of perpetual perfection. She had changed jobs, taking a position with lower pay but more meaning, and moved to a smaller apartment without requesting parental assistance. Each step seemed to bring back a more authentic version of my sister, one I was cautiously getting to know. My parents were slower to change, but change they did. Our conversations became more balanced with genuine questions about my life and work. They still praised Chloe, but they had begun to recognize my achievements as well, even if they did not always understand them. Most importantly, Emily and I were expecting our first child, a fact that had prompted serious reflection on what kind of parents we wanted to be. We had vowed never to compare our children, never to create a hierarchy of worth within our family. The pattern stopped with us. As I looked around our dinner table that night, I felt a sense of peace that had been decades in the making. The journey had not been about revenge after all, but about truth and boundaries that made authentic relationships possible. Family healing did not require dramatic gestures or complete transformation, just honesty and the courage to create something new. If this story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family to protect your own worth? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like and subscribe for more stories of healing and growth. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to inequality is not revenge, but the quiet dignity of living your own truth. Thank you for being part of my journey, and I wish you the courage to honor your own worth always.